This is The Other 50%, a history of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where we talk to successful women in Hollywood and hear their stories. Well, this week I got to speak with Mary O'Leary. Now, she is a producer of daytime dramas or soap operas. She's worked on General Hospital, The Young and the Restless, Guiding Light, Another World, and One Life to Live, and she's won 7 Daytime Emmy Awards. So this is a treat because I was completely unfamiliar with how daytime drama works, and you might be too, so this was interesting to hear. Have a listen. So let's start with, what is it that you do?
I have been a producer on 5 daytime soap operas. The first was Guiding Light, Another World, One Life to Live, General Hospital, and The Young and the Restless.
So all of them. Just about.
My life has been a soap opera in television.
Now, can we call them soaps, or do we call them daytime dramas?
Well, certainly in the business, we like to refer to them as daytime dramas, and at award shows, they refer to as daytime dramas or daytime serials. But we all know that people think of them as soap operas, which goes back to, of course, Procter & Gamble all those years ago in having a radio drama, and the sponsors were soap products. And that's how the nickname sort of developed. Oh, those shows are operatic, and they're sponsored by P&G does soaps. So that's where the name came from, and has, over the years, remained.
Now, how did you get to be a producer on there? What was your journey working your way up?
Well, I would say that when I was in high school, I was very interested in entertainment. I think possibly being a middle child, I wanted some attention. And I did a little bit of acting. It was a summer theater in my neighborhood. It was called Block Party.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, the smallest state of all the 50 states. And this program was to go into the sort of inner city parks and do a performance. And a lot of it was improvisation. We'd adjust to perhaps the community we were in, the audience, and making references that would suit where we were. I mean, it was a pretty amazing experience, and I was 13 turning 14, and I enjoyed acting. So then when I went to high school, I was really excited by the prospect of doing some more acting, but unfortunately at that time they had only a senior play, and while you could help as an undergraduate senior play. But I was happy to help. I realized I didn't mind going up on a ladder or setting up the props on the stage. So as I was heading towards my senior year, a brand new teacher arrived, and he said, "Senior play, everybody should be in the play." And he changed it. I had been voted as president of the drama club. So when he arrived, I went into his office, introduced myself, and said, "I'm the president of the drama club." And he said, "Well, we're going to have a lot of changes. We're going to include everybody can come." And he said, "And I want to do field trips to New York City. Have you ever done that?" I said, "No, the drama club.
Let's do that.
Let's do that." And he said, "Well, we'll apply 2 trips and we'll go in and we'll see some Broadway plays." I said, "Great." And his entire wall was already filled with playbills and posters from Broadway. So I was in awe already. So exciting. And he said, "Well, I need you to do a lot of work. Are you willing to do that?" I said, "Absolutely. I'll be here every afternoon after school." And we just started right away. The first production was Summer Tree, which was about the Vietnam War. And he had to cast a young boy outside school because you needed a little boy. And he, as it turns out, also ran a Saturday morning theater school for children. So one of the students he selected to come be at the high school. And it was, again, doing a really good production, prop-wise, scenery-wise, and getting everybody involved. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, we're also going to enter the New England Drama Festival." Well, we had never been in the Drama Festival. And in fact, he said, "And yes, we're actually going to sponsor it here at Classical High School." I said, "Well, so not only are we participating, we're going to sponsor it." So we submitted our play, and our play was chosen to... It was selected to go into it's basically we had a state drama festival, and then ours was selected to go into the New England Drama Festival, which was a good thing since we were sponsoring it. Yeah. And I remember there was a student who stayed in my house because students who came in from Vermont, New Hampshire needed a place to stay, and a student stayed with us. But I was up there like organizing, being the host, and making sure everything was running smoothly. And even though because I was a senior, and classical high school is a tremendous amount of work. We used to have to take classes like Latin and ancient history. But I still managed to get all my work done because I was so enthusiastic and passionate about this teacher and being a part of the drama club. I knew I still had to keep up my grades, and it turned out it was like the best year for my grades as well.
And this is how arts and education changes lives.
I mean, this man did change my life. He was, if you ask me who was the first mentor in my life, it was Dr. Bernard Masterson, because he just showed me that you could have a career in this business and just work hard. And I just worked on, we did 3 plays that year, did the 2 field trips, did the drama festival. And I was sure, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. Now, my parents said, well, you could go, because they were both teachers, go to college and become a teacher, and become a drama teacher like Mr. Masterson. So I did. I went to the state college, and I took all the education courses, but also worked on shows and took theater classes. And in my heart of hearts, I knew I wanted to move to New York.
Yeah.
I wanted to pursue it as a career. And I saw myself being backstage, because even in college, I did act. I think in about a play each year, maybe the smaller black box productions as opposed to the main stage. But I was just as happy and content to be backstage, helping any way I could. And that's what I wanted to do.
And that's the advice. If you can do anything but act, do it.
Yes, it's a very rough life to pursue a career in acting. So I went through college, did do student teaching, both at a middle school and a high school. But when I graduated, I knew I was going to make the move. And I was a little apprehensive about going alone because I'd only been to New York a couple of times. And so I ended up connecting with a friend and who wanted to go. And so we went one weekend. Well, I should say that summer I did summer stock in Chatham, New York, actually, and met people who were living in New York City. So I went under the understanding I was going to visit a friend in New York, but what my parents didn't know was I was looking for an apartment. And with this friend, we signed a lease, and I came back and said, I've signed a lease. I'm moving to New York.
What did your parents say?
They were completely stunned, but they didn't say no.
Yeah.
There was no holding me back. I think my mother was particularly supportive because she had loved the arts. When we were young, I had 2 brothers, I had 2 sisters and 1 brother. Actually, my brother and sister were twins, and then I was 13 months later, and then 3 years later.
Oh my God.
And yet she found a way, and she was teaching. She went back to,
she was exhausted.
She was exhausted. She was a teacher, married, had her children, and then went back to teaching when my youngest sister was about 4 years old.
Wow.
And she was the one that looked at each of her children and said, what do you like? Let's do that. Like my older sister loved the piano, so she would take her to concerts in that local concert hall in Providence. And she knew I loved drama. And so she took me to see the Warwick Musical Tent in Warwick, Rhode Island. In the summer would have Betsy Palmer would be in The King and I, and Hello Dolly. And she would take me. So she clued in with her kids and what they wanted. And of course she was sorry that I wanted to move far away, because in her eyes, New York was far.
Not so
far now. But so there was always go, which of course as a mom you do. You have to say, let them fly.
Your dream.
Yeah, exactly. So there I was in the Big Apple, and what I wanted to do was work in production as a stage manager, the person who always put everything together. I'm an organizer, and so that was the job I thought.
And you were thinking theater.
Yes, I was thinking theater, and so I was looking for jobs, basically, of course, off-Broadway, which I got, but not much money. And since I had worked in the summer stock theater, again, there were people, like some of the directors I contacted, of any work. And I was getting pretty busy, but never really paid very well. Yeah. It was, a quick bagel in the morning and budgeting myself. And finally, there was a show I had done off-Broadway, and it moved to off-Broadway. And so I had turned down summer work because it was opening June 1st. And we were all excited. And it opened, and the critics panned it. It was closed by June 6th.
Oh.
And there I was without work for the summer. So it really made me think, I really need to think about a little bit more job security, financial security. So I took a course in television production at a school that I think has merged several times into other schools. It was called the Television and Radio School at the time. And I worked on a cable project, again, for very little money. It was a comedy. It was kind of a pilot for a comedy series. But I thought, soap operas. I remember watching some of the soap operas, and here they are in New York. Most of them at the time were in New York. So I targeted. In those days, before computers and before voicemail, you could actually call and get a human on the phone.
Weird.
So I actually called. I got the name of a particular person. I usually didn't ask for the executive producer. I would go into associate producer, coordinating producer, wrote a personal letter, and said, could I come in for a general interview? And in fact, I was able to achieve that at 3 of the shows. And I would basically tell them that I've been doing theater for a few years. I want to start in television. And I kept following up with them and guiding light. And it's interesting because the gentleman that I interviewed with was filling in for, I believe her title was associate or coordinating producer, and she was on maternity leave. And so he was assistant producer, and he's the one who interviewed with me, and he had a theater background. So we really connected. We really did. And he called and said, well, now there's a job in the production office, and you have to come meet the executive producer. So I went in, and I chatted about my theater background, because I had I had a little television, but not that much. And she clicked, and she said, you're hired. And I started in the production office at Guiding Light. And at that point, again, it was just before computers, so we still had typewriters. And then gradually, fairly quickly, the computers were coming in, and we're all sort of shifting. And the writers who were so used to typing a script and sending it in, it's like, no, do it on the computer. And then the whole process changed. I mean, I literally saw they used to have a script typed, and then it would be messengered to an actor, and that all changed. Messenger service stopped. We didn't need that anymore because we had, well, on rare occasions you did, but basically everything was over the computer. And so I was at Guiding Light working in the production office, but actually quickly I got a promotion because the man who hired me chose to leave. So
you got his job?
So I got his job after 6 months.
Well done.
So I was the assistant to the producers, and it involved scheduling. Well, I love scheduling, so my mind is just very organized, and so it would be figuring out how to take, there was 5 shows in a week, we did a show every day, no reruns in daytime, and it was to figure out, based on the sets, and there were 2 stages, what sets would fit at what stage, the order of scenes. Sometimes you had to deal with actors, some actors might be in a play at night, and how do you get them out, I really was having fun doing that. But an interesting thing happened. I actually had, as a kid, seen a little bit of a show called Dark Shadows, which was on ABC television, and the lead character was a vampire, Barnabas Collins, played by a Canadian actor, Jonathan Frid. Well, I had come home from Guiding Light one night, and I turned on the station, and they were rerunning episodes of Dark Shadows on public television, interestingly enough. It was New Jersey Network. And I thought, wow, let me watch. And there was some shows I had never even seen because I had come to the show late in the run. And they announced we're going to have a fundraiser next week, public television, a phone-a-thon, and Jonathan Frid will be in our studio. So I said, well, I'll have to watch. I wonder what he looks like after all these years. So I watched, and he did a performance of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, and it was wonderful. And then they interviewed him, and in the interview he said, well, of course, they talked about the character of Barnabas in the series, and then they said, what are you doing now? And he said, well, I'm actually working on a one-man show that I hope to tour. He said, perhaps in New York or colleges, we'll see. And I wrote him a letter, and I said that I'd seen the program and to admire this performance, and if he needed any help, I had a theater background. And a few days later, I'm sitting in my apartment, the phone rang. He said, hello, Mary, this is Jonathan Frid.
You are kidding me.
And I was like, yes. And then he said, I'd like to meet with you, and I have another person that's interested in meeting with us to discuss my one-man show. So a few days later, after work, I walked over. I was a studio on West 26th Street and 7th, and I walked to 18th and 3rd. And there was Jonathan Frid and a man named William McKinley, and he said, well, let's sit and talk. And so I had thought he already had a show put together, but as I chatted with him, he said, well, I have ideas for shows, but I haven't put anything together yet.
And he just announced it on television?
So he said he had been going, every year there had been fan conventions in which they would have the audience ask the actors questions. Well, Jonathan said, I didn't remember, certain episodes over the years. It was so long ago at this point. He said, so I asked them, the people that were running, well, could I just read some poetry or stories or something to them instead of just answering his questions? So he said, sure. Well, the first thing he read was fan poetry that he had kept. Because when Dark Shadows was on, teenagers would gather outside of the studio, and they would want to take a photograph, a chat with him. And one of them, or several of them, I guess, were writing poetry and handing them to him, and he kept them.
Wow.
And so he actually read their fan poetry, which was amazing, like the fans were listening. And then he started experimenting, reading some stories. And he said, these experiments have really given me the idea of putting together some type of compilation show and performing it. And
he knew there was an audience then.
He knew he had following. But of course he'd like to say, I'd like to expand and have anyone come to see me. So William and I just sort of sat down, and I said, well, do you want to do one author? No. Like I said, this like Hal Holbrook tours the country as Mark Twain, Julie Harris did the Belle of Amherst. Mm-hmm. So he said a wide variety of authors. So William and I started researching. We would have regular meetings with him, how to figure out, like, okay, what would we do? What would be the order? And in the beginning, he wanted to have something sort of thematic to make a statement about man against the universe.
Yeah.
So he was structuring it, and then I began to say, well, it's getting a little esoteric. And we would invite people over to have rehearsals in his apartment, and then you'd get feedback.
So you helped him develop his show.
I helped him develop the show. So I actually said, we need to veer a little bit more towards your image, the legendary star of Dark Shadows.
Don't wreck everything by doing the show.
So he was a little bit uncertain about that at first, but then we got a Stephen King and a wonderful story by Wilma F. Nolan called Dead Call, where a man gets a phone call from his friend who's dead, and he's trying to entice him to commit suicide. So a lot of spooky, but then also humorous. There was a James Thurber story called Mr. Public Gets Rid of His Wife, and this man was just kind of a bumbling guy who's just been browbeaten by his wife, just wants to get her downstairs and hit her on the head with a shovel. And he's like, basically, she doesn't want it. Why do you want me to go down to this damp basement? I don't want to go down to this damp basement. And he said, well, I want to hit you and come down. It's very, so he had humor as well. And then he said, well, now how do I get this booked? And I said, well, I'll have to find out. I went to performing arts conferences for colleges. They used to be called Association of College University Performing Arts. Now it's just Association of Performing Arts Presenters. But I would go, I'd set up an exhibit booth, and I would sell the show. I'd never done anything like this before.
You just figured it out.
I figured it out. And then I had to put together press kits because he'd get a booking. I'd have to do a contract. Then they would, well, what were the technical requirements, which was very simple. He basically had a music stand, a stool, and a spotlight. And it was his voice and his expressions that told the stories. But I was doing all these facets of production I had never done. So he finally said, you're my co-producer. And we formed a company which was called Clunes Associates, because his heritage was in Scotland and his family homestead had been called Clunes. And I was the one-woman show behind the one-man show. And it was amazing. I mean, the fact that he trusted me, and in fact, I mean, I was so much...
The fact that you had the chutzpah to write him a letter and say, I want to do this show with you.
And ironically, that young man, William, who met with us, wasn't even in college yet. He was still in high school. And he, too, had written a letter. And it was amazing because here was Jonathan, who was 60 at the time, met with two kids. And, I'm in my 20s. Will is like not even in college yet. And he listened to us. He respected. What he saw in both of us was our commitment, our passion,
desire,
our hard work. And he said, great, let's just work together as a team. And there was never any ageism. It was just, let's work. And Incredible. It was amazing. And he recommended Will go to NYU, and he did. And so as time went on, Will wasn't as available to us to work, but I used to, and I was continuing at Guiding Light. I had gotten another promotion, but I was still weekends, nights, working.
Oh, wait, you were doing both?
I was doing both because I was already in the production. I've been in production office Guiding Light a year when I met Jonathan. And so he also, I think, people have said, well, did he think of you as a fan? And I said, he looked at me already. I was an assistant producer. He saw me as a producer, even though I was fairly new to that career.
Yeah.
I said, but he put a lot of responsibility in my hands, and I think I became fearless. And because he so believed in me. But eventually what happened as the years passed, we had a 8-year working relationship. I finally said, Jonathan, and now I'm getting ready to produce in the control room, which is a completely different demand. And I also just wanted a little bit of a personal life. And I said, so we can find someone to run the company. And he said, Mary, I've really been thinking about going back to Canada. and going to sort of semi-retirement. So
while he was doing all this stuff, you're rising the ranks.
Yeah. So I was becoming, associate producer, coordinating producer, and learning to produce in the booth when, interestingly, we had a new executive producer come in. While I had been at Guiding Light, there had been 3 different executive producers. When the 4th arrived, it was Jill Farron Phelps. And she was the one that really did train me in the control room to be a booth producer. And I was basically a backup because we had 2 producers at the time. But she was a really impressive woman, had been in daytime for a number of years, had actually been a music director, and then became a line producer, and now was executive producer at Guiding Light. And I would love the times when she was in the control room and I would sit and listen to her give notes to the actors and how she very quickly could change the way a scene looked with talking to the lighting director and the actors about the mood of the piece.
Now, can you explain to us, because I'm very familiar with how film production or, dramatic television happens. It sounds to me like daytime drama happens a completely different way. Like, what is the structure? You're talking about the producer giving actors notes in the booth. Like, how does that all work?
The show works incredibly fast because when I first began at Guiding Light, we were doing a show a day. And you would start in the morning, the actors would have a morning rehearsal hall, get into hair and makeup, and then you would move set to set and say maybe the first set would have 5 scenes in somebody's living room, and then we move to the restaurant set and there's 4 scenes. And you move through the day. And you had the time, the money to do a scene a second time, a third time to try to improve it, or if something went wrong, you could stop and fix it. As time has progressed, there have been a lot of budget cuts. And you pretty much now want to get it on one take and that you can get done sooner.
Do you have multi-cameras?
Yes. I'd say we used to always have 4 cameras. Now they've gone down to 3 cameras, again with budget cuts, but you have 3 cameras. And you've ISO'd them all. So in the edit room, you have the footage, what's on all 3 cameras. So if you need to take out time, you've got the coverage, or if there is something that goes wrong. That is the decision as a producer in the control room, sitting behind the director and the second pair of eyes for the director, and something goes awry, but the actor gets through the scene. Well, is it something we can fix in the edit? It's often, fix it in post. Yeah. But sometimes it's like, well, that camera was moving that you want to cut to, so we need to go back and do it again, the whole scene, or maybe just a pickup, which is starting midpoint in the scene, and maybe just doing part of the scene or the rest of the scene.
So is the director directing camera 1, camera 2, camera 3? Are they also directing the actors?
Yes, in the morning the director comes into the rehearsal hall or even onto the set, and they go through the scenes, and if the actors have any questions sometimes about what they're doing or could they adjust a line, the director will go over it and say yes we can, or maybe they need to check with the producer about if it's a slightly more involved line change. So that's the morning, and then the director's in the seat in the control room, take 1, take 2, take 3, and the TD is switching cameras on the director's command.
So they're kind of cutting it as they go.
Yes, in a way we're editing as we go, so that each scene should then be in the edit room. You're assembling all those scenes, and hopefully internally it's a pretty good looking scene, but most likely there's something that maybe needs to be fixed. So there is a
Some needs to be tweaked, but you're not starting with hours and hours and hours of raw footage trying to put it all together.
No, you've got a line cut from the director has created a line cut.
Now, do you have a different director every day, or do you have a director who stays there for a year and does the show?
The directors will be under contract, and on average, you'd have 4 directors. So in a week, somebody's doing a show twice, and they might be doing 2 in a row, or they're doing Monday and Thursday, and they may stay 3, 4. Directors stayed many, many years on a show. Mm. Sometimes they might leave and go to another show, or try something else. So the director, I've always felt it's the director's day. The pace of the day is set by the director, and you hope you hit the floor running, and that there aren't too many questions from the actors, or that everything goes smoothly and the actors don't go up on lines or have difficulty where it slows the day down, because we really want to get that show done by the end of the day.
So how many pages are you doing every day?
Well, it's really changed over time, because now it's almost rare to just do a show in a day. I was just on Young and the Restless. We had 6 episodes in 4 days, Tuesday through Friday. And so you might do anywhere from 100 to 150 pages in a day.
So everyone has to be on their game. Like actors have to be on their game for sure.
Yes, actors come in and they've already pretty much had to know their lines. I mean, the director is now telling them in the morning, this is your movement, but hopefully they're already off book.
So every night they're memorizing for the next day.
Yes. Now, not every actor's on every day, because there's usually several stories being told at the same time. And perhaps as your A story is climaxing, your B story is beginning to come in, and there's more, those actors are working a little bit more, and then your C story. And so it ebbs and flows. So an actor might find, oh, I'm not on for a whole week. That your contract actors are normally, a guarantee is 2 shows a week. So even if they aren't on that week, they're still going to get paid for 2 shows, but they might end up in 4 shows that week.
And how far ahead is the writing?
The actual physical, I mean, the writers sit down and pitch the storyline to the executive producer and the network, or when I used to work on Guiding Light, it was both the Procter & Gamble show and on the CBS network. So you'd have documents read by the P&G executive and the CBS executive and the executive producer, the head writer. They would have a meeting to discuss the story that has been laid out by the head writer. And then, okay, go ahead now write. And every week they would break it down into outline form. And there was a meeting on the outlines. And then those outlines would be coming in about 5 weeks or so on average before it's going to be taped. Because once the outline's approved, it goes to the script writers. The script writers send in, they have a week to write the script. The script editor receives those scripts, has to read every script for continuity, tracking, dialogue. And then production's also reading it all to make sure that we have everything we need, from all the different special costumes that might be required, props.
The wedding dress. The funeral attire.
Yes, exactly. And then if there's a fire, fireproofing all the clothing. So there's a weekly production meeting where we go over the whole next week. And then every day there's a meeting just to review the next day, to make sure everything has been accounted for and the order is clear, that factors in any need for a costume change or makeup and hair change, because particularly we may be doing scenes from 3 episodes in a day. So there may be a new day when people have costume changes. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the schedule, have we allowed time for that, so that we're not waiting for someone to go change. We can go to another set, do something, and then come back. So it's always about keeping the day running quickly, so that you can hopefully get out. And they've changed that. Years ago, we would run very late. I mean, I remember days at Guiding Light, we'd go to 11, 12 at night. Even one time, there was a big event, and we finished at 6:30 a.m. The actors are coming in the morning for the next show when they're seeing their fellow castmates leaving. But now, because with budget cuts
and labor
law, they want everything to be faster. We never, I mean, on average, you try to get your day done by 5, 6. You definitely never want to go past the dinner hour, which is 8 o'clock, because you have to take care of feeding the crew.
That's a good day job.
So it's really interesting too, because over the years it would be could be very, very late hours, but now it's much more of a regular job.
So this is a moving train.
Constantly.
Is it seasonal, or is it 52 weeks a year like this?
Well, again, when I first started, it was you worked every week. You did a show every day. I mean, usually around holidays, you'd manage to get some time off, a few days. But then again, with budget cuts, and they started saying, well, let's see, if we take a day off, like a Monday, a percentage of the crew, wardrobe, makeup, hair, are daily hires. So if you're not shooting that day, they're not paid. But
your weeklies, you still have to pay.
Right. And obviously people that are producers would still be paid. And certainly certain people, directors, actors, have guarantees. But there was a percentage of the crew that wouldn't be paid, so they realized we could take a whole week off. So if we take weeks off, we save on the budget. That's when they started doing, let's do 7 shows in 5 days. Let's do 6 shows in 4 days.
Then you get a little ahead.
Then you get ahead. So taking weeks off, they incur a savings on the bottom line.
So you can take the last week of December off.
Right. So usually over the years, it'd be a week or even 2 at Christmas, but you had to get 25 shows ahead.
Right, you got to work for it.
You had to work for it, exactly. So that was a burden. I mean, actors, it's amazing when you think about you're coming in and doing scenes from 3 episodes. That's a lot of pages. And
they have to cry in almost every one. That's a lot of work.
Well, and also we had Peter Bregman in The Young and Restless, a marvelous actor, had to play 2 characters. He was his own doppelganger. So he had, in a day, your scenes as your character, Jack, then your scenes as
your
Marco,
evil twin.
as your evil twin, and sometimes you might have scenes together. So he had so many. One day I had like 20 scenes, but it was double the amount because he was doing the scene twice.
They just have to get out of their way and just do it. You can't even think about it.
I mean, there's really sort of I guess you'd say, an actor who's been in daytime a long time has a certain muscle that just keeps getting used to be able to remember all those lines and then let them go. Yeah. Or even if we're in the middle of the day and the show is running long because the DGA production associate is timing the scenes, and we'll turn to the producer and say, well, we're really getting long, so I'll look ahead and perhaps the writer has suggested some tentative cuts, or I'm familiar with something that's going to be repeated because I've read every script and I know what's coming up. So I'll say, okay, we're going to cut this. Now go out and tell the actors, on this page 52, we're cutting half the page. So on the spot, they've got to factor in their brain, I'm not saying those lines anymore.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that actors can adapt very quickly.
They're good.
Yeah. And even, so as a producer, I will turn to the director and say, I have a couple of acting notes. I don't think they fully understand the intent. Or I know where this is heading, so this beat is really important. And you try to do it very concisely, and the director tries to tell the actor very quickly in a few words so that we can keep the day moving. But I'm often there is a help for the director because I might see the boom shadow that he doesn't see because he's very focused on his cameras.
You have a bigger picture.
Right. And associate director in the booth is looking at all the ISOs to make sure that when it goes down to the edit room.
What's an ISO?
Well, each camera is isolated. So in other words, there's a record machine for each camera. Hence, then you have all the footage for the edit room to be able to play with. This is a full day when the editors are putting the show together, and then a producer will come down and screen the show, and maybe it's still a little bit long and make the decisions about what to cut.
The producer will make those decisions?
Right.
Interesting. Now, what's the demographic of like the production team on a daytime drama?
Well, what's really fascinating in the history of daytime, if you go back to when things were first starting, women were in very strong roles.
Yeah.
It was Erna Phillips was really the creator, the woman created soap operas, and you would find female executive producers, female directors. You wouldn't find
earlier than other
other television. I mean, we're talking in the 60s, and you wouldn't find on the crew like a female camera person or a female lighting director. That was pretty much a male world. But over time, you have, and I did work with a wonderful lighting designer and camera woman who's right now very busy. So it was kind of fascinating that the upper echelon really was women in daytime.
So the producers,
writers,
and
directors. Over time, certainly men did come into it. I think they began to see that there was some security in these jobs that they might not have in other production. I mean, what other production works year-round in television? It's pretty much all project-based. Or if you're on a series, it used to be 26 episodes. Now sometimes it's just 10 and then go away and come back. This was year-round.
Do you think, like the women who were directing daytime, do you think they were able to cross over into other genres? Or was that not as easy?
I don't know that many tried. I mean, even Dark Shadows, which was aired in 1966 to 71, there was a female director. And then I believe towards the very last year of the show, she also crossed into producing. I don't know that I think she did some Playhouse 90 and some of that early television, but I don't know after. Now, also the wonderful thing about daytime soaps is that you would promote from within. So you might start in the office answering the phones, and then you could become a DGA production associate, and you'd be in the control room timing the scenes. You could work your way up to associate director, and then I saw associate director become a director, someone become a stage manager. So they were very much supportive of, if you were doing a great job and committed, to training you on the next job. So in the production office, often the people were trained to become the booth production assistants. So because it was such a fast-paced environment and a lot of details. It was great to have people who were coming up in the ranks.
Yeah.
Which is what I learned every aspect. That's why today I could coordinate a production because I did all the scheduling. I understood the budgets. I knew then also how to communicate the information to all the different departments. So I wore a lot of different hats, and now it holds me in great stead to be able to have all those skills. But I particularly love being in the booth and talking to actors, or having an actor come into my office and say, I really don't understand where this is headed, and what am I really looking for me to play here. And I love sitting down and discussing subtext with the actors and being their support. And sometimes they would have frustrating days, and people would come in and be a little upset, and I always kind of took that in stride. And I think that was one of the wonderful things about female producers, that you can sort of look at them and see, okay, they're having a really rough day here, and I'm here to help them. In some ways, it's almost the role of a mother sometimes, is that you need to be, a lot of times it's about listening to me. And I certainly know with my child, a lot of times it's just listening. I need to listen.
Use all your emotional intelligence in that job.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's so interesting. Now, you also raised a child while having this career.
Yes, I did.
How did that go?
First of all, I'm a lesbian, so I did have a partner at one point in my life, and when I was working at One Life to Live, we were together, and we wanted to have a child, and I said, well, let's look towards adoption. So we actually went to Russia, and I adopted my son from Russia. And he had been in an orphanage from birth, and he was 9.5 months old, had some medical issues which did not hold him back in life at all. And One Life to Live was amazing. I came back, they had a huge baby shower for me. And I had taken a maternity leave, but it was hard to go back. I was really having fun with him.
Oh, I think everyone cries that drive first day back to work.
Yeah. So at the time, my partner stayed home. She had a career at the time in Broadway as a dresser, wardrobe department. And but I got the job opportunity to come out to Los Angeles to do General Hospital, and she was in great support of that. But when we got here, it was very isolating for her, because now there was no support system.
And the theater is not quite the same.
No, it's not quite the same. So unfortunately, things started to sort of fall apart, and we tried to make it work, and it didn't. So I became primary caretaker, but I'm also working long hours, so it takes a village. I didn't have any family. I had only a cousin here in LA that I reconnected with, who was working and had her children were grown and working. But she always had us over for Thanksgiving, Christmas every year. We still go. It's wonderful. But basically, I would look for people that could help out, and there were some services I used, and I dreaded the time he would wake up sick, because I would be calling the service and getting someone who I'd never met face to face.
Yeah, it's so hard.
And it's so hard. And trying to quickly give them some information and say, call me if you need me. Those were, as I say, the days I was praying didn't happen. And generally he was in good health.
Takes you time.
Yeah. But also too, I would look, I developed friendships that could, really be mentors for him, and some really wonderful male role models for him. And he's just really blossomed. I felt that I wanted to raise him, which has been called Unconditional Parenting. I think it has a few names. Eco-parenting. Basically, with really listening to making
the nonviolent parenting, the Echo Center. Yeah,
yes.
That's great.
Really listening, and know that we all have emotions. And when they're little, they don't really understand their emotions. And so it was taking a lot of patience and trying to get him to understand, okay, I see you're mad, and how we all get mad, but you don't want to throw your toy at somebody. You want to, go into a safe space, like your room, and, throw your toys in there. And you have to begin to say, okay, what is it? I can do this and control myself. And I think my son has amazing emotional intelligence because I took the time. I'm not perfect. There were times I was very impatient. There's funny times he calls me on my emotions sometimes because he recognizes them. But I'm blessed. He's an amazing boy. He's athletic. He does very well in school. He's social. So I look at him and I'm just so proud of him. He's becoming this amazing young man. He's going to be 17 next Sunday, this coming Sunday, and junior in high school, so he'll be college really soon. It's been a juggle. I mean, I remember one time when I was little on the weekends and I was sitting reading my scripts, and he came over to the stack and he picked one up and he flipped it over, like, look at me and not the script, you know. So, you know, certainly I would try to say, okay, let's play, and now it's your time to go to sleep, and I'll go read my scripts now and try not to fall asleep. So yeah, there's definitely times that you have to juggle. And my boss, Jill Phelps, who came out to General Hospital and brought me to Los Angeles to produce General Hospital, was wonderful about knowing that I wanted to be at my son's school play. If there was something during the day, or Mother's Day, they're doing some activity, and can I come in late because they're doing something in the morning? And she had raised a child herself, and she knew that important. So I was able to juggle her with the other producer. I was like, okay, well, you do this day, and then I'll do the next day for you, and we'll trade off schedules so that I can go to see the event at school. But yeah, usually somebody was picking him up and spending a couple hours with him until I could get home, and then we could sit down and have dinner and talk about our day. When he was little, I would say, you tell me about your day and I'll tell you about my day. Because pretty much it's been the two of us. His other mother does see him a couple of times during the week. We worked out an arrangement where she would come to my place. And
she still lives here?
She still lives in Los Angeles. And it's interesting because I know it's very hard when you have a breakup, and it's always, I think, best interest of the child. And for some kids, they may go spend a week every other week or every other weekend. But what's amazing with my former partner is that she was willing to say, well, I can come to you. So he would come home from school, or she would pick him up, and then they would come and be at my place, and he'd have dinner and check his homework, read to him, and then I would be in later and she would go.
So you had the stability.
It really gave him so that he knew exactly where all his toys were, his homework, everything was there. It wasn't like, oh, I left it at the other place. But she was wonderful that she was willing to compromise in that way, because I've heard of many cases where there's great heartache around the breakup and the kids getting caught and struggled and back and forth. And so I think in terms of the breakup, it was, for him, easier than it might otherwise have been.
Yeah, good job, Mama.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, in the world of daytime drama, what do you know about the pay equity between men and women? If there was a lot of boss ladies, did that help?
I think that in daytime, there has been equal pay for a female producer to a male producer. Obviously, crew, as I begin to see some women come in, oftentimes is unions, and unions are setting rates. Casting directors are female there as well as male. I mean, I think for the most part, it was fairly equitable. I think among the cast, you might find, because of course if an actor's been on the show a long time, their pay scale is going to go up, and so someone coming in will be at a lower pay scale. But if I saw a case where an established actress came into a show and was not paid the same as a male co-star, and when wanting to possibly adjust that as renewal of her contract came, there seemed to be hesitance about doing that. So she ended up choosing to leave. So I think among actors there has been some inequity between female and male. But I don't think that I noticed that I was aware of it, particularly among staff. I think it was they were pretty equal payment-wise. But perhaps it's because women did start.
And then I wonder how the pay scale is. We'd have to look in the Paymaster. What the scale is between that genre and other genres of television.
Well, I would say primetime is more money than daytime.
Yeah.
And movies would be more. I mean, you're not going to hit the kind of $1 million payment for an actor. Although, if it is an actor who's been on the show for 25 years, they're certainly making a very good salary, and it is year-round.
Yeah.
So, the potential is there. And the head writer is certainly paid well. Again, probably more if you're on nighttime, but they're paid very well, but they have a tremendous work. I mean, they're constantly coming up with story day after day, week after week, tremendous amount, and a lot of juggling, because you, as a writer, come into a show with established characters who have a history of this one can't have a baby and this one's had 4 marriages already. So you're locked into having
you have to remember all that.
To know the history of the characters. And then there are requirements about how many sets you can put up in a week, especially now if budget is like keeping sets up longer. So, okay, well, I want to have the scene, but I guess I can't do it in a bedroom. So could I possibly do it in a restaurant?
Yeah.
So they're having, and then again, there's 4, 5, 6 storylines going on, and the interweaving, so that this
because they all know each other and they're all related.
Right. So it's a really tough job for a head writer in daytime.
Yeah.
That probably is maybe more so than nighttime, but they're not, yeah.
But I guess the economics of the genre and the time and how much money the show makes probably dictates a lot of that. Do you budget by the week or by the episode?
By the week, because your standard is 5 episodes in a week, but if you do 6, then there's the bonus. And again, it really varies because some studios own their own shows, some don't, like ABC. Disney owns General Hospital, for example. Young and Restless is Sony owned but licensed to the network. So NBC is.
You might be paying more for a licensed show,
right?
There's
right, exactly. There's licensing fees, so there's different structure on shows. I mean, basically the cast. There's the set production staff and crew, but a lot of variables in terms of how the arrangement is with whether it's the network or there's 2 entities running the show. But I think it's the people have said, well, people aren't watching soaps anymore, and that's why they've gone away over the time, because when I started, there were 13 soap operas on the air. Today there are 4. And I said,
what's left?
The shows that are left on NBC is Days of Our Lives. On ABC, it's General Hospital, and CBS is The Bold and the Beautiful and The Young and the Restless.
What about All My Children?
All My Children's gone. All My Children and One Life to Live were canceled back to back several years ago now.
That was my
5
show.
Years ago. Well, they did try to bring it to online.
What's Susan Lucci doing?
Oh, she's doing some Desperate Housewives, one of those. She's keeping herself busy.
Okay.
She was All My Children actually was in New York, and they did bring it out to LA for a couple of years maybe. So a lot of those people then moved out to LA that were New York based, and then when it was let go, unfortunately went away. A lot of them ended up staying in LA. But the sad thing is that there's so many reality shows that are less expensive than your average soap opera that the bottom line, as executives sit at a desk and are looking at the bottom line, it's cheaper to do a reality show.
Sure. Because
especially, let's say it's a judge show, you've got the same set. We have constant sets in motion, taking up and down, and the set dressing changes and designing new sets, and so there's a lot of cost involved. And so they decided, let's put on a show that's cheaper, not realizing you're not going to have the same fan base, the same people watching that type of show. And it was a great loss for people who had watched All My Children, like yourself, for many years, or One Life to Live, to suddenly not have the show anymore. And I argue the point that it wasn't just that people weren't watching anymore, because they were. It was that the competition to do it less and get more profit was enticing to the executives.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I'm a little glad that I had stopped watching the show before it got canceled, because I don't know if I could have taken being that bereft.
Yeah, Agnes Nixon was amazing, who created All My Children. She actually just passed away recently.
Yeah, I saw.
She was amazing, a storyteller. I mean, that's really the great head writers, Doug Marlin, who did As World Turns and brought that up to #1. He was there 8 years. Harding P. LeMay, who did Another World. Bill Bell, who created Bold and Beautiful, Young and Restless, among others. I mean, they were just amazing storytellers.
Oh, once you're in, you are hooked.
Yeah, and the amount of material that would flow out of them. And what's sad today is I think those very strong head writers could look at the executives and say, this is the story we're telling. No discussion. But as time has gone on and different people have stepped into the role of head writer, there has been a lot more interference by executives that want to put in 2 cents, and it doesn't always bode well for the show. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you should just let the creative people go, and
you got to keep the show in the business.
Right. And not to say that they might not have stories that don't go as well as others, but writing by committee is not necessarily the best way to run a show.
Maybe not every time. What is the next step for you?
I'm really got different things that I'm looking at. I've actually been approached to possibly write a bit about some of my experiences.
Now we're talking.
Certainly going back to Dark Shadows, and what actually came up is Dark Shadows celebrated its 50th anniversary, 50 years of television. It started in 1966, although Jonathan Frid didn't come into the show until a year later. And I actually went and spoke about my work with Jonathan, which was amazing, walk down memory lane. And there people said, well, we would love to hear more, and you should contemplating writing. And of course, I was at Guiding Light at the same time, and people said, well, you probably have a lot of behind-the-scenes stories.
And you've been on so many shows.
I've been on many, and there's just a lot of...
Do you have pictures?
I have a personal photo album of pictures.
I'm seeing the book right now. Yes, you have to do the book.
So, hey, maybe there's a publisher out there who'd like to get in touch. So I'm toying with that idea. I've been doing a lot of actually meeting people and networking through the wonderful Women in Film organization. I was at Paramount recently talking to a woman who's worked in scheduling animation for years, and just making connections and sort of exploring, because I've spent my career in producing daytime soap operas. It's kind of this amazing opportunity I have right now to just explore different things and really see, well, what direction would I like to head in.
Yeah, and with that experience, you can do anything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, on average, I produce 260 episodes a year.
Yeah.
There aren't many people that
Take
can say that. So I absolutely have tremendous skills, and I love working with production designers as well as staff and cast. So I'm...
And you had a creative hand in it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really... I have a lot of ideas, so I'm just exploring my options now, and enjoying having some time to spend a little bit more time with my son and seeing where I land. He wants me to go to Atlanta and work on Walking Dead, but I said I think they're fully staffed.
You never know.
Yeah.
That's great. How do you see kind of the state of women in the industry right now?
Well, I would like to see more women directors. I think when you look at, say, the Academy Awards, they're few and far between in directing, so I would like to see that. I think that there are a lot of executives that are male, so I think the more female executives we get in there, hopefully they would be supportive, although unfortunately there have been times where a female executive doesn't necessarily mean they're going to hire a woman, but I hope we all become supportive.
I think you need to get enough in there, so it changes the culture. How do we do that, do you think?
Well, I think one of the wonderful things about, again, I'll mention this Women in Film organization, is they're having meetings now about supporting each other and passing on, having some wonderful networking sessions. I went to one recently about how to pitch, and there were women who work at many different, one was at Disney, one was at Comedy Central, and they said, let's have some women come up and pitch and let's discuss. And it was the opportunity for women to say, oh, this is what a pitch session is, and
here's how you do it.
Here's how you do it. And so I think that organization is really focused on how can we improve the situation and how can we not have sexism, ageism. So I think it's talking, supporting each other is what's going to change. Complaining about it isn't going to help, so let's just get there and take action.
Just get on with it. And then there's that new law about not publishing actors' ages in IMDb.
Great.
That should help, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
it probably adversely affects women more than men, I would think.
Right. Probably. I mean, I think back again when I was young and met Jonathan Frid. There he was at 60, and he started a whole new phase of his career. So that's when I think, particularly actors, I mean, they act 70s, 80s. You still, I mean, look at Norman Lear, 94 years old. I mean, he's still up there, and still he just pitched a show idea. it's amazing. And so if you've got people around you that just open your eyes. And I mean, it's just amazing. Imagine working with a gentleman like Norman Lear. What an amazing mentor. I actually recently had an interview with a wonderful woman who's the CEO of Mystic Art Pictures, and her mentor was Gary Marshall 25 years ago. And again, he's just passed away recently. But she just had this amazing, she had a vision of wanting to have a production company, and he said, you can do it. And she did. So it's wonderful to see people who are very successful, have been in the business a long time, older, supporting people and saying, come on board of
just
all
being
ages.
really generous.
Yeah.
Now, do you mentor anyone?
Well, what's very interesting is that I have always enjoyed having interns, college interns on the different shows that I have been at, and I'm willing to sit and talk with them and make suggestions or give them advice, which they can take or not. But I had an opportunity recently after this Dog Shows fan convention and toying with the idea of writing, I got in touch with a young man whose name was Paul Wargo. And Paul, the very last year that I worked with Jonathan, he had a particularly heavy fall schedule, and I couldn't go out with him. And so I hired this young man who had been at Salve Regina College when Jonathan performed there. And he contacted me, and I said, you'll be a stage manager. You'll go out, and this is all the information you'll need. And so 20 years later, I call him, and we're talking on the phone, and he said, thank you. I said, what? He said, you were my mentor. I learned so much from you. And I was so moved because I hadn't really realized that. But that
You didn't know you were doing it.
I didn't know I was doing it. So I think over the years I probably have done that. And
probably more than you know.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I love having, as I say, interns, and to see that enthusiasm and those that have the drive have ended up with jobs on the show. The ones that have really stood out do very well.
That's great. I'm surprised to hear there's so much upward mobility in the shows when it's such a stable job, and I would imagine people stay for a long time.
It is true. I suppose years ago there was a little bit more movement. Sometimes people would, various reasons, might choose to try something else, go another show. So there was definitely more movement in the early years. I remember Guiding Light. But then sometimes, you'd sit in a show, it was 5 years and nobody changed because... Right, you were just saying it's fabulous to have a year-round job, and so why leave? I think that that's a wonderful thing that maybe doesn't also exist again with the shows that are much shorter. I don't know how much internal opportunities. Although I do remember years ago, a young man had been a college intern at Guiding Light, New York, and he came out to California. And he got a job on a pilot, and it was Frasier. So he ended up getting employed and eventually became a writer on the show. So there was clearly, but that was around a long time. That was, 9 years or so that Frasier was. So there certainly must be, in long-term shows, the opportunity for moving ahead.
Do you consider yourself a success?
I have 7 Daytime Emmy Awards. I consider myself a success.
And so does the industry, apparently.
Yes, I've really I've been blessed in that way. I have gotten some wonderful opportunities.
Are you a badass?
If a badass is being fearless, I would say yes. I have undertaken projects that are challenging and run with them and look forward to the next project.
And then, as you can hear, our interview got interrupted by the lawnmowers and leaf blowers outside. And I didn't even get to properly thank Mary. So, Mary, thank you. You've been listening to The Other 50%. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I want to thank Mary O'Leary for sharing her story. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, and on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features and bios of our guests. Thanks for listening. See you next time.